So Donald Trump was indicted and arraigned. No one is above the law, depending on the law, because there are certain laws that the entire US is above. And that includes Trump. Now, he may or may not see consequences for this batch of charges, but there are other offenses that he will definitely not go down for, and they're the kind of offenses that have been committed to varying degrees under every living president from Carter to Bush to Obama, and today I want to talk about some of them. Welcome to Breaking Points. If you've seen this video, you've heard this story. In 1974 in East Timor, this new government took over, the Fretilin Party, a democratic socialist, pro-independent party. They want self-determination for East Timor, so obviously no one was into it. Australia, the UK, the US, and Indonesia all agreed that East Timor should probably just become part of Indonesia. Self-determination was off the table. In December 1975, Indonesia invaded East Timor. Gerald Ford and Henry Kissinger go over to Indonesia to see the president there, and they tell him that they're totally cool with this. Now, Indonesia at the time held more political prisoners than anywhere else in the world. Ford even warned the president there, if you want Congress to keep approving aid packages for you, you should probably let some prisoners go. And so, after a lot of negotiating, Indonesia announced plans to release 30,000 political prisoners over 3 years. So that quieted Congress enough. 1977, Carter's inaugurated. Meanwhile, Indonesia is committing atrocities in East Timor. Reports coming out alleging 50,000 to 100,000 civilians dead. But the State Department basically dismisses this. The goal was to improve relations with Indonesia, not have them be a pariah state. So the National Security Council, they recommend downplaying East Timor. You have people saying, just focus on the 30,000 political prisoners being released instead. National Security Advisor Brzezinski, father of MSNBC host Mika Brzezinski, is saying that these Southeast Asian countries, like Indonesia, provide a hospitable climate for our investments. Also, the assumption by the Carter administration and others was that East Timor becoming part of Indonesia, that was an inevitability at this point. At the same time, the CIA is saying Indonesia is running out of weapons and they can't really control the countryside of East Timor. In 1978, Vice President Walter Mondale goes on this tour of the region. He goes to Indonesia and offers them 16 Skyhawks. Now fast forward to 2006, the East Timor Truth Commission concluded that 1977 to 1979 was the worst humanitarian crisis in East Timor's history, and the key to Indonesia's assault was aerial bombardment by OV-10 Broncos, F-5s, and Skyhawk A-4 airplanes. By 1981, between 108,000 and 180,000 people died out of a population of 600,000. Massacring civilian populations, wars of aggression, we're talking about war crimes and crimes against humanity. And aiding war crimes, say by supplying fighter jets, can be a violation of the law of armed conflict and also a war crime. On August 20th, 1998, President Clinton ordered a cruise missile attack on a pharmaceutical plant in Sudan. The Al-Shifa pharmaceutical plant was the target. This plant supplied half of Sudan's medicines and a lot of their veterinary medicines. Now, is there a good reason to blow up such a place? I mean, maybe, but that would be an extraordinary set of circumstances. By the way, do you know who owned the factory? Maybe they were manufacturing chemical weapons. Maybe they're manufacturing VX nerve gas. As a matter of fact, a soil sample was taken nearby containing 2.5 times the normal amount of EMTA, which is a chemical used in VX nerve gas. This was the main evidence showing that the factory produced the nerve gas. They also thought the plant might be linked to Osama bin Laden, but as George Tenet said, that wasn't ironclad. Also, get this, one piece of evidence was that, unlike the websites of other known pharmaceutical manufacturers in Sudan, this company's website did not mention any products. Only terrorists have bad websites. The State Department Bureau of Intelligence and Research put together a report for Secretary of State Madeleine Albright before the attack. It basically said, our evidence isn't really enough to justify this, but it was a foregone conclusion this plant had to go. Wait, who owns the factory? Officials are raising concerns up to the night before the attack, but August 20th, they blow up this pharmaceutical plant that was maybe making VX nerve gas. No, they weren't. They were just making medicine. Also, they still don't know who owns the factory. It ends up being a Sudanese businessman named Salah Idris. Conveniently, though, he turns out to have an indirect connection to Osama bin Laden. They freeze his accounts at various Bank of America branches. They kind of got it right by accident. Maybe, but at least this wasn't all for nothing. Oh no, except Idris denied that he had any connection to any terrorist group. He sues the government, and the US unfreezes his assets. It was all for nothing. Can we at least learn something from this, though? Probably not. Someone from the State Department wanted to draft a report outlining the issues with the evidence. Obviously, it got killed by higher-ups, and Albright apparently was not interested in having that debate rehashed. Case closed. The month after the attack, Human Rights Watch comes out with an open letter to Bill Clinton saying, international humanitarian law says that you have to do everything feasible to make sure you're hitting a legitimate military target. And it really seems like you didn't, which would mean you're in violation of the law of armed conflict, or LOAC. But funny enough, blowing up Sudan's primary source of anti-malaria drugs is not the scandal Clinton is remembered for. Okay, so Bush is an easy one. For one thing, the Bush administration authorized an international torture program. After 9/11, black sites popped up in places like Afghanistan and Romania and Thailand. The CIA's secret detention program, entailing prolonged incommunicado detention without trial, violated international legal prohibitions against enforced disappearances. Disappearances violate or threaten to violate a range of rules of international human rights and humanitarian law, including arbitrary deprivation of liberty, torture, and the right to life. Waterboarding is torture. Bush endorsed waterboarding and admitted to using it. This covers Bush, Dick Cheney, former CIA Director George Tenet, and Condoleezza Rice, who apparently gave the first known approval of waterboarding. I haven't watched their master classes, but if they have sections on running international torture programs and never facing consequences for it, I mean, they are the experts in that. There were over 500 drone strikes during Obama's 2 terms. Let's go over some of the legality.
Simply put, these strikes have saved lives. Moreover, America's actions are legal. We were attacked on 9/11. Within a week, Congress overwhelmingly authorized the use of force. Under domestic law and international law, the United States is at war with Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, and their associated forces.
Okay, so paraphrasing Yale Law and Policy Review, the associated forces Obama's talking about are essentially co-belligerents. That's the relationship between third-party states and warring parties. This is controversial, and it is far from clear that the groups at issue are sufficiently organized and associated with Al-Qaeda to render them co-belligerents under international law. The claim was essentially that the laws of war enable the US to kill anyone, anywhere. That position is highly legally contested, and to accept the idea that anyone, anywhere in the world can be killed, even if civilians may be killed too, would in effect mean recognition of the concept of a global battlefield. International human rights law is the generally accepted framework for dealing with acts of terror in the international community, and under that, there is no right to pre-plan intentional killing, and there is no tolerance for the death of bystanders. No state has the right to consent to US violation of these rights. Also, drone strikes aren't even necessarily productive in their goal. Strikes in Yemen had apparently increased support for Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. Okay, so on to Trump. Trump did watch Shark Week with a porn star in a hotel room, but his sins as president actually get much worse than that. Yemen is the worst humanitarian crisis in the world because since 2015, Saudi Arabia has been bombing them into the Stone Age. There have been about 20,000 civilian casualties, in part because the bombing raids target infrastructure and schools and hospitals. Now, Obama had asked Saudi Arabia pretty nicely to try a little harder to not kill as many civilians, and Saudi Arabia keeps forgetting that he asked. So the thing is that targeting civilians is a war crime, which makes selling weapons to Saudi Arabia also a possible violation of international humanitarian law. This war started under Obama, and this fact was not lost on the administration because at a certain point, people in the Obama administration said, hey, we might be doing war crimes over here. We should maybe stop this. State Department officials who shepherd arms sales overseas are worried enough to consider retaining their own legal counsel and have discussed the possibility of being arrested while vacationing abroad. So even though Obama initially supported Saudi Arabia, he ended up blocking a shipment of bombs he had originally okayed. But then Trump came in and sent the bombs anyway. But it is very unlikely people like this will ever be held accountable for the real crimes they commit where people actually die. In fact, the US has been so hostile toward the idea of international justice and the International Criminal Court that the United States preemptively sanctioned ICC officials for opening an investigation in Afghanistan that might reach US personnel. And like Obama opting not to investigate anyone from the Bush administration, every incoming administration offers that professional courtesy to the outgoing administration. I mean, if Biden went after Trump for violating the laws of war for giving weapons to Saudi Arabia, how could he, under any circumstances, justify also selling weapons to Saudi Arabia? And with that, that'll do it for me. If you found this video interesting, make sure you are subscribed to Breaking Points. You can also check out my YouTube channel where I talk all about media and politics and things. Link in description. Liking and sharing always helps. Please do that. Thank you to Breaking Points. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.